you for the invitation, Steve, and it is good to see you again.
Hi everyone, Steve here from RSM, and welcome to our latest episode of our Coffee Conversation series. Today I'm joined by Ewen Macpherson. Ewen, welcome.
Thank you.
Ewen is the owner and founder of Symphony Hill Wines, one of the finest wineries in the state of Queensland. So really good that you could be with me today, Ewen.
My pleasure, Steve.
So as everyone's aware, this is always about having a chat over a coffee, a casual conversation, but today we're doing something a little bit different. Given that you are the owner of Symphony Hill Wines, we thought a very good opportunity to sample your fare. So tell us a little bit about what we're drinking today.
Well, I thought I'd start with our new release of Vermentino, which is an Italian variety. And it's one of those new emerging varieties that are really exciting, and it's such a big world of wine out there. At Symphony Hill, we like to explore with all sorts of different varieties. So this is our Vermentino. It's our new vintage. 2020, because of the drought, we weren't able to make any. But our previous vintage was finalist for Australia's Best Alternative White Wine in the
fantastic.
WineWise magazine. So but this is an exciting new release, and people have been waiting for it. So I thought you could be the first to try it.
Beautiful. It is a lovely drop, Ewen.
Okay, good. It's like a cross
Thank you
between.
very much.
It's like an Italian Sauvignon Blanc, if you like. It's got the acid backbone of Savvy B, but it's also got a lot of fleshy fruit and texture to it, going on a lot more dimensions to a typical Sauvignon Blanc.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And we'll come back to that in just a moment. We'll come back to talking a little bit more about your fine wines, which I'm sure there's many people out there who are looking forward to trying as well. But perhaps before we get there, if you could tell us a little bit about you. Who is Ewen Macpherson?
Wow, Ewen Macpherson. So yes, I started the winery 20 years ago on the Granite Belt. And prior to me being a vigneron, which is the French way of saying mortgage payer, I was a computer programmer for 10 years in Brisbane. And when my kids started to come along, I grew up on acreage on the Sunshine Coast, so I wanted to basically have them grow up on acreage, and I wanted to go back to uni and learn something new, so I did a degree in the viticulture, and off we went on the journey of wine production.
Fantastic. So on that journey, Ewen, I'm sure it's been a wonderfully rewarding journey, but I'm sure it's also had its fair share of ups and downs along the way as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about probably the more specific ones in recent times, where the environment that we find ourselves in have been for the last almost 2 years. But we'll come back to that. But perhaps if you could share with us the Symphony Hill journey. Where over that period of time, tell us all about Symphony Hill Wines, and where it is today.
Yeah, well, it started from scratch. When I looked at the area of the Granite Belt when I was doing my uni degree on site selection and site suitability, I got to see that the Granite Belt was an undiscovered area of fantastic potential to make some of the world's best wines, and which for most people who think Queensland and wine in the same sentence will be doing a double take. But we've certainly, the whole region's proven that we can do it there now. But back 20 years ago, it didn't have the history of that production, but it had the climate. The climate's spectacular, 1,000 metres above sea level. And so we get the real cool conditions. Our Cabernet Sauvignon ripened 4 weeks after Clare Valley ripened their Cabernet, for instance. So a lot of people don't know how such a cool climate the region is. So I was excited to say, yes, this has got huge potential and it could work. And if it doesn't work, I'm young enough to rebuild my life if it fails. And but it's a huge financial investment, huge emotional investment, and a big ride. And anyone who's successful knows that there's a lot of dark days and a lot of failures along the way, and a lot of, when starting a new business, of not realizing what you had in store for you when you started. Anyone starting a winery, you just have to buy 10 times the amount of expenses you think you're going to spend, and you've got to be patient. So you plant your vines, you eventually make wine and age it in oak for 2 years, and then you're learning along the way. And so it's a very long-term investment strategy. And often I was thinking investment was inverted commas, but it has worked out to be a really successful business now, which is exciting. But it has been, a huge drive, and it's taken everything from myself and my wife and my family to put into it to get to where we are now.
No, that's wonderful. And along the way, I know you've you've picked up your fair share of awards. Maybe you could tell us a little about some of those.
There's been a lot of awards which have been really satisfying. So when I'm rocking in my armchair, I'll be able to look back at some career highlights. For instance, our Shiraz we grow on our own block is just like a French Syrah, very much cool climate Shiraz. And at the Royal Melbourne Wine Show, we were nominated for a trophy for Best Rhone Style Shiraz Trophy. And any winery who says they were nominated, it means they didn't win. Otherwise, they said they would have won it. But it was a great one to lose to because we actually lost to a Tasmanian Shiraz who won the trophy and went on to win the Jimmy Watson. So by association, I think we almost won the Jimmy Watson.
I like that. I like your positivity.
But it also gives that third-party endorsement on our Shiraz and also how cool a climate we have, that it's in a Rhone-style Shiraz, as opposed to the beautiful big hot climate Barossa Shiraz, which is a totally different style. It's a bit like that Dolly Parton red wines with big ball of fruit in the mouth and bursting with flavour and high alcohol, which is Australia's famous for. This is more that cool climate, almost like a Syrah style, of which Australia's the only country to call Shiraz, but I digress. But so that's that red one. That's our signature red. Our signature white is Gewürztraminer, which is our German variety, which has got jazz hands. It leaps out of the glass, served on Qantas business class flights. So when I talk about career highlights, having 3 of our wines served at Qantas, selected to be served on Qantas business class flights is something it's seen on TV as far as my marketing goes. It's just we're so proud to have that happen. Our Reserve Shiraz was served to Prince William and Kate, and when they were in Brizzy, and Barack Obama during the G20. So it was great to be able to have the best Queensland wine served to these guys at the time. And but it's not just Symphony Hill doing such a great job out at the Granite Belt. There's so many beautiful wines out there now, and the region's still very small, mum and pop operations. We've been really busy, and it's an exciting time to be alive.
No, that's brilliant. Such a good story. I guess one of the reasons we're having this conversation is it really came out of the environment that we find ourselves in the pandemic, and the opportunity to talk to business leaders and people from a really interesting and diverse range of backgrounds about their own experiences in dealing with a pandemic, the learnings that have come out of that, and also the challenges. So can you tell me some of the challenges that you faced in a business sense, in a personal sense, if you wish as well, but some of those challenges that you've dealt with?
Yeah, it's really weird. So COVID has made some businesses really suffer, and other businesses have benefited from it. And it's been a really weird situation across Australia. So supermarkets are going gangbusters, of course, and other businesses have gone to the wall, and it's really hard. The Granite Belt wine region and Symphony Hill in particular have had, prior to COVID, 2 years of COVID-like bad things happening. So we've had drought, really, really bad drought in the region, and bushfires causing damage, and smoke taint from the smoke causing damage into the grapes and then their wine. And then it was like biblical plagues happening. And we thought, what's next? Well, the next plague turned out to be COVID. And so that came along. And then we were shut down for 2.5 months. And at the time thinking, well, all right, well, now we have to just get through this, and hopefully then we'll be able to get to where we want to be with Symphony Hill in terms of recognition and sales, and because we're always concentrating on the quality. So COVID happened, went into our bunkers for 2.5 months. I got my first long weekend off in 10 years because the cellar door was shut. So that was Easter, and loved every minute of it, but that was all good fun. That was one positive. But then when it opened up again, who would have thought that COVID was the answer to rural Queensland's business? In that we were just 300% up in visitation since it opened again in June, I think it was, in 2020. And ever since that, it's just been continually busy. And people who were going to be in Paris or they're going to be in Rome ended up at Symphony Hill and other wineries there. And we're thinking having theme days, like on this weekend, if you were going to be in France, everyone's going to be dressed in French uniforms, we'll play French music and come on out and celebrate the alternative there. But that was if it was ever going to get slow, and it never got slow. And so it's just been wonderful times to be able to share Queensland country with Brisbane city folk and Toowoomba and Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast. And so, yeah, it's been a great time to be alive, and people are loving coming out and realising what's in their own back door. So that's been... So, yeah, we had our 2 years of COVID misery prior to COVID, and then it's actually been really good. I mean, no one likes lockdowns and no one hates all the suffering that's going on, but so like survivor guilt, I guess, but it's, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, absolutely it does. So for you, it's been a positive story, and typically with these conversations, we have a chat about the challenges the business faces and the opportunities that have come out of them. And but by the sound of it, for yourself and Symphony Hill, it's all really been opportunity. It's all been positive, which is
I love hanging out with corporate types like yourself who have a totally different life experience to the small to medium business that I run, and where my work experience is very different. I love learning from corporate people about how they do their days, and they're so different to how I do mine. I can always learn something from it. But for instance, I've yet to do a Zoom meeting. Which I mean, everyone's going, what? But it just has not been necessary. So it's a small business. We're all there at work. There was no actual lockdown for essential workers. So we're all at the winery, and we haven't needed to communicate via Zoom. And so, yeah, just as one little point of difference. But also as a small business, this is more going into a different area perhaps, but how we run our business is the advantage of small business over larger businesses that we can turn directions really easily, and we can adjust what we do really quickly without having to go through all the chains of make it happen. It's a lot of a simpler process, so I find that really interesting. So
could you, and that's a really interesting one, Ewen, because a word that has sort of, just sort of become part of the vernacular is pivot. We hear about businesses of having to pivot. Not so much now, but certainly 12 months ago when we were kind of in the throes of the beginnings of what was the pandemic, and we had to pivot our own business at RSM in terms of how we deliver to our clients, in terms of how we engage with our clients, and hence the Coffee Conversation series, which was originally, as I said earlier, it started as in they were Zoom conversations.
It sounded like a fun meeting to go.
Yeah, it was a good fun meeting, but that was an example of pivoting. So what changes, again, as you said, being a small business means that you're agile. So what sort of changes have you
So for COVID, it's the way that we present our wines to people at the cellar door. One, because of COVID restrictions, meaning we had to have the 2 square metre rule and everyone spread out. And also we had so many more people arriving. So what we ended up doing is changed up everything in the winery. We used to have just the tasting room at the front, and now throughout the whole winery, we've got fairy lights and music and barrels and chairs, and we can actually fit so much more people in for a tasting than we could pre-COVID restrictions. And people are loving it. So yeah, they get to see more and more of the operations while they're tasting wine, and it's all a lot of fun. So it's actually made it more enjoyable for us to serve people, a lot more people, and the people there get to see all sorts of different parts of the winery.
So it created a new client experience for your guests, which is wonderful.
Tours around the winery, which people get to see what's happening, and being in the country is a bit different to the cities. Less restrictions, but there still are restrictions that are happening. So.
No, that's wonderful. Well, Ewen, thank you so much for sharing a little about the Symphony Hill journey and your journey. A really good story, and just so good to see a business like yourself, putting Queensland wines on the map where they need to be.
Yeah,
thank you so much for the Vermentino.
Pleasure.
Chin chin, and maybe once when the camera stops rolling, I believe we may have another one back there as well, which is
Tempranillo. Now this is just one trophy for Queensland's best red wine. It's our $95 Tempranillo. And you've got to channel the count from Sesame Street to pronounce that variety better. So Tempranillo.
Yeah, one more time.
One Tempranillo. Yeah,
nice.
And it's a great wine, big like a Grand Reserva style, and it's it'll blow your cheeks out. It's
looking forward to
tappers
it.
And tap
looking
dancing.
forward to it. Looking forward to that as well.
Cheers.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining us again. I'm sure you would have gained some words of wisdom from Ewen, and if there is anything that you heard today and you'd like to learn a little bit more about, particularly those fine wines, you know where you can find Ewen at Symphony Hill Wines in Ballindine in Queensland. Thanks once again for joining us, and take care, and look forward to seeing you all again next time.